Thank you again, everybody, for coming. It's a great honour to be here at the Warren Centre. I'm actually on annual leave, but I've taken a couple of days out because it's a bit of a passion project of mine, and you don't need to encourage me much to talk about it. So, very happy to be here today to do that. As I was introduced, Power and Water is the only sort of multi-utility in Australia and almost in the world, I think. We're quite unique in that respect. My role as the manager, I work for a business unit. We're responsible for all the energy services delivered in remote communities, and these are predominantly island grid systems, diesel power systems, and these are unregulated power systems. So that's the background. So today, just in terms of an agenda, I'm going to give you a bit of a background on the project and the town where it was delivered. Then I'll talk about the setup program. This project was part of the setup arena funded program, and Daly River is a little bit unique within that program. I'll talk about what was built and how it performs. If we were to do it again today, we've learned a bit and the costs have come down, so I think it's interesting to see how the economics are changing quite rapidly. Have had attempts to sort of estimate what it would cost to be much higher at 100% renewables. I think that's kind of an interesting question for a lot of people. We're always very keen that we get to 100% very quickly. And then finally, I'll just talk about some of the system stability issues and how we've solved those for the Daly River system. Okay, so Daly River, it's a remote Aboriginal community. The Aboriginal name is Nayu. It's about 220 kilometres out of Darwin. We're lucky that it's all sealed roads there. Generally, you can get there any time of the year. We get a few river crossings that come up, but it's usually only a couple of days delay. It's a good place to do a project if you're doing new technology because it's kind of close to a major centre. But in the future, we foresee these projects being in very remote locations where access is not so easy. In terms of a power system, it's quite small probably to what some of you in the audience are used to. 700 kilowatt peak demand, about 800,000 litres of diesel are burned there a year prior to the project being delivered. We typically have 3 generator power stations, small, medium and large, and that allows us to run the engine which is appropriate for the load. We have typically a 4:1 ratio between minimum winter loads and peak summer loads, so it's quite seasonal. And that sort of influences the sizing of the system components as well. In this presentation, I should have mentioned we're a grant-funded organisation. We get our funding from a not-for-profit entity. So what we've tried to do is just put out like a commercial costs in here, what it would like to do on purely commercial sense. So these aren't necessarily our costs; they're a little bit lower than that. But just to give indicative pricing for purely commercial delivery. Okay, so the solar energy transformation program or setup was a program which has been co-funded between ARENA, Australian Renewable Energy Agency, and the Northern Territory Government. The Northern Territory Government's committed $27.5 million to the project. ARENA has a grant facility of up to $35 million. That project's nearing completion now. We're building 10 megawatts of solar across around 20, nearly 30 communities, remote communities. So most of those are what we call medium penetration systems, so we're augmenting diesel generation with solar. In one of those communities, though, we've added a battery system. That's the Daly River project, which I'm going to talk about in detail today. So we're targeting 50% fuel savings at the Daly River community. Okay, aerial shot of the project there. So that's the 1 megawatt DC array. And then in the background there, the green structure is the diesel power station and the storage. Typically, those storage tanks are designed to give at least 4 to 6 weeks of maximum demand supply there. In some communities, they're cut off from road access for 9 months a year, so we often have to barge fuel in. It's quite a different operating context to most people are used to. Just slightly to the left of that power station is a container system, so that is the energy storage system. It was provided by a system integrator, Kinos. Spoiler alert, if you've never seen inside a big box of batteries, this is what it looks like. Lots of batteries. Okay, what are the costs? Total project cost was around $6.5 million, so about 2/3 of that was in the cost of the PV array. Because of the challenge of remote distances and, typically our build costs in remote locations is quite a lot higher than it is on the East Coast, unfortunately. So that is a challenge. Even though these technologies can save fuel, they can also be relatively expensive as well. The battery system was about $1.8 million. That was a fixed price contract. We spent a lot of time and money getting this right. We opted to do the integration ourselves because we see that microgrids and battery technology it's a very important technology, and it was important for our organisation to develop that in-house expertise. So we've developed the power station control system. We've augmented this battery into our diesel power station control system. Okay, this is our HMI view of our typical power system. So on the left there, typically 3 generators, typically 3 feeders. Normally they're all in operation, but this screenshot was taken when one of the feeders was being serviced. The PV is connected through the HV network. It's 11 kV distribution network. And the icon to the top of the PV is the battery system there that's connected to the LV bus inside the power station. So what happens is that during the daytime, we charge the battery up. The battery we're able to turn off the diesel engines then. We'll run on just purely on a solar diesel grid during the daytime, and we'll continue to charge the battery while delivering all the load in the community. The next slide explains that a little bit more clearly. This is a marked up drawing from the modelling tool we use for these systems, which is Homer Pro, might be familiar to some people. So on the top graph there, you can see in the very early morning, the diesel engines providing all of the power to the community. That red trace is overlaying the black load trace. And you can see that the orange solar curve starts to come online in the early mornings, and the diesel engine's underloaded and then switches off. The graph below there, you can see that the battery rectifier is starting to charge the battery. So when we get to a minimum state of charge there, we then turn off the diesel engines. We're running purely on an isochronous inverter grid. So during the daytime, that battery continues to charge if there's excess solar energy. And in this particular day, you notice there's a small yellow section. I'm not sure how easy it is to see there. That's some PV spill. So what happens in the cooler months when the loads are lower, we can't actually save all of that energy. So there's a little bit of spill happening there. So typically that's more likely to happen in the cooler months, and then in the summer months, the spill doesn't really happen at all. We use it all. So as the sun starts to go down at the end of the day, you can see that the battery inverter starts to complement the solar generation, and then finally it's providing all of the load, and that'll run until the evening time, until that battery's flat, and then we'll transition back to a diesel grid through the early hours. We monitor the performance of this system. We're very keen to make sure we know how well it performs. We want to understand the economics of the project for future projects, and also get some feedback on how well our model matched actual system performance. So probably the key numbers to look at there is the 4th column on the right there. That's the fuel savings, and we just calculate it purely as energy delivered of PV versus the entire load. So in July, this is for this current financial year, we were saving about 64%. The latest month here in November, we've had the PV array offline for a week while some servicing work was done there. But on the far column there, you can see that we're trending ahead of our model. We're currently about 7% ahead of where we thought we'd be with the model. The project's been quite successful so far. We're going into the wet season now, which is typically when we're going to see cyclones and more inclement weather. So it will be interesting to see over that period whether we are able to hit that 50% fuel savings target that we're modelling. But we're optimistic at the moment. If we did it again today, we think that there's a lot of cost savings, and only the economics of these projects are just getting better all the time, which is a great place to be. We feel very confident we could halve the cost of the PV build now with some sort of prefabricated array structures. We're trialling that in a couple of sites. We're pretty confident that we're going to see at least 20% cost reductions in the battery retail price. And we've learnt a lot of lessons doing this project, so we've got a lot of savings that we can make when we do the project the next time round. We've developed a control system now. It's plug and play. As I said, we've got around 20 to 30 odd other hybrid or solar power stations where if we upgrade the control system, it's purely software, and then we add a few more kilowatts of PV and another box of batteries, and we can migrate all of those other power systems to high penetration systems. So yeah, some people are interested in what it would take to be fully renewable. So I've had a bit of a crack at this. These are our estimates, so I would say we probably need at least 1.5 times more PV, so we're looking at 2.5 megawatts of PV. 3 times the kilowatt rating of the inverter, because you need to be able to store a lot more energy during the daytime while you're generating, so you can bank it overnight. And in terms of being able and being confident that you've got energy to spare, in those long tail, weather conditions of extended sort of cloudy, rainy weather or monsoon seasons, you need a lot of storage, like of the order of 25 times. So these are back of the envelope calculations. The point being that, I think if for an island power system, the idea of being 100% renewable is still a fair way away. But that said, my personal opinion is that probably the least cost penetration level for power systems is probably north of 50% right now, given the diesel price and the current system component costs. System stability, I know this is a concern for engineers. So as I mentioned, this system runs diesel off for at least 12 hours a day. We've had it running up to 18 hours a day, diesel off. We've done quite extensive protection system modelling. We've done secondary and primary fault injection, so we know how the system performs under fault conditions. The battery is only twice the full load capacity of the system, but we've been able to make that protection system work. It's adaptive in that as soon as we switch back to a diesel grid, then the protection settings change again, back up to settings appropriate for the diesel. We had to make a few changes to the control system, but none of it was especially complicated. I should say that these are unregulated grids, and we probably don't have the reliability requirements that other electrical engineers on the NEM need to worry about. But we've been pretty happy with the results we've been able to achieve. The nice thing about an inverter grid system is that it's rock solid 50 hertz. We can do 100% load acceptance, which diesel generators, they struggle with. It's highly stable. We've swung from charging to discharging within milliseconds, and the system is super stable. So I know it's a very flexible component. It does have some constraints compared to a diesel generator, but it also has a lot of advantages. And one challenge we did have was inrush current capability. It's difficult to energise a transformer with the inverter system just because of the limited inrush current, but that's not a standard operating mode for our power system. We always transition or do our feeder switching with a diesel grid and then transition to an inverter grid later on. So. And there's also ways of avoiding inrush with transformers anyway. We don't see it as a challenge, but it was something that we picked up in our integration, and something we can work around next time. So that's it. That's one part of the world where batteries do rule. Daly River. Thank you.